This is day 2 of the February 88 7-day retreat. There have been several questions about sitting. Why do we sit? Why the long hours of sitting? I've jotted some of these questions down, again, not verbatim, only quite a bit afterwards. And some of the questions are synthesized out of several. One question is like this: our schedule, with their long hours of sitting, are actually a direct hand-me-down or continuation. I don't know how it was exactly put, but that was the spirit of it, from the old Zen center. I guess we did it then to arouse energy. And arouse the energy in order to be able to better be one with our practice. In the mind, the goal of eventually, sooner or later, breaking through. And I find myself now, even now, slipping into this striving mode while sitting. Another person said, in sitting these long hours, I find getting bored. Wanting some things to happen and wanting other things not to happen. One person remarked, this is just an excerpt from what this person said: what do I do with this big house? This huge space here that has been created. How do I deal with that? And another person put it this way: referring to yesterday's talk, saying, yesterday you mentioned something about attention while lining up in the grocery line before the cashier. Can there be attention there? And mentioning that made me realize, yeah, that's where it has to happen in my daily life. So why all this agony here of sitting long hours? And yet, this person continued, my life proceeds on such an incredibly hectic, frenetic track that unless I sit for a while at home, once or twice, there's complete caught-upness in the freneticness, hecticness, buzzing around from here to there, this to that, him to her. So what is it about this sitting? Several people two or three mentioned that in doing a lot of sitting, observing what goes on in this mind, looking inwardly, coming in touch with all the things of the self, the thoughts, the mental images, the emotions, all surrounding the self. I find that I'm getting more and more self-conscious. Very sensitive to what I think about myself, what people think about me, and what I want people to think of me, what I don't want them to think of me. Is that what sitting does? Make one more self-conscious? I think we have a lot of work with these questions to do. Have not prepared anything. We're now, right now, starting now to look at these questions together. Enter into them. Wonder. And proceed. We'll come back to the first question. Person saying, actually the schedule that we have is a direct continuation of the old Zen Center schedule, which it is. We have discussed it many times, people putting in requests, why do we have to start at this unconscionable hour of 4:30 in the morning? Couldn't we start at 6 or 7? Maybe go a little bit later. I'm a night person, the person will say. I could go till 12. And we've given it serious consideration. And the best we've come up with is no one has to get up at 4:30 in the morning, even though the sting-a-ling goes around. But if one is very tired, and we do provide the state-of-the-art earplugs, free. People can use those. I'm using them myself. So one is somewhat free from the sounds of the retreat and can go back to sleep. We've even said if somebody sleeps in, not sleeps in, we say oversleep, then we can make allowances for meetings. But in thinking about it, I have not been able to come up with the 6.5 hours necessary to see people, to meet together, unless we start at 5 in the morning. Because by 9:30, it's time to stop meetings, at least for me. And waking up early in the morning, there I can start at 5 o'clock. Maybe if I was a night person, we could shift. So this is the best possible schedule that we have come upon for having meetings, having a talk, sitting before the talk, lots of breaks to get the work done that needs to be done after meals, and yet hopefully allow some free time for somebody who would like to come back to the sitting and yet needs some break, wash up or clean up after washing dishes or whatever. In some retreats, particularly in the summertime, the sitting room will be quite empty in the afternoon because many people, often the majority of people, are on walks and are not sitting. So just because it says from such to such a time, sitting time, does not mean that this is recommended, suggested, or sort of propagandized, that one should be doing that. One may perceive it that way, but this is not the intention of the schedule. It's a very factual statement of what can happen at what times. And it is up to ourselves to discover our conditioning, our feeling compelled to do what we think is expected of us. We may be wrong in our perception, or to do what we feel most people are doing. To air that, to bring it to light, to look at it, and to investigate and find out whether, if the compulsion is seen and can go, we will still sit without compulsion, or walk, or go and lie down without feelings of guilt. If we cannot find this out in a quiet place here where we talk about it and can discuss it, where will we find this out? How we operate in our set, programmed, compulsive ways. And not just find out how this is happening as it is happening, but whether it can end. Whether there can be freedom from the compulsion of our conditioning. At least the unnecessary, burdensome, conflicting or conflict-arousing conditioning. The conditioning that is important for our survival survives. We don't have to worry about it. In practical matters, we can be sure that we will find the way to the kitchen or the icebox. We will remember where we live, where our bedroom is and where the toilets are. So, is it possible to sit down and look what is happening in this mind and body? Become aware of the pattern of striving setting in, to discover that. It's not just a mentation, a thought process. The whole body starts accompanying that motif with tensions and juices, chemicals being released. This thought of striving, I must attain something, I must get someplace, I must do as the others do, I must be seen in the sitting room. She may be looking for me. She's not. I'm saying this in case it may be helpful. I used to be amazed how when I started training in a Zen center, for whatever reason, compulsively and out of interest, I used to count who was there, not when I was doing any teaching, but as a client, and know exactly where everybody was sitting. I knew that. It became imprinted. It was a map, like a seating chart. I had that in the mind. And I knew who was where. And that has completely vanished, that activity. Can't usually remember who is where and so forth. So this is not of compulsive interest anymore. So are we interested in our compulsions? In meeting up with them face to face, directly, as we're sitting or walking quietly. Not just focusing on something. That is where the danger of focusing on a practice lies. That's something that can be learned. One can become very proficient in learning to concentrate the mind, to make it one-pointed, as the expression goes. Something that over a period of time we can make great progress in that. Albeit some people already start out being able to do that much quicker or from the beginning, whereas others, even after a long time, have a difficulty with that. So it's not necessarily, like with everything else, there are certain talents that come with our inheritance and upbringing. So, if one becomes very proficient or strives to become proficient to concentrate the mind on something, one may not run into this compulsion to strive, to become better than the others, or good according to one's own standards, which are the standards of the others. We introject standards that are imposed upon us very early. Standards of excellence, of achievement and attainment. So concentrating is not conducive to an open awareness of what this mind is all about from moment to moment. Albeit there are noticeable feedbacks and attainments through concentrating. One may attain a certain calming of the mind if one manages to concentrate on counting or on a repetitive mantra. That's why these methods have for a while, I don't know how popular it is now, but was a boom in mantra repetition, concentration on mantras, because it was even tested with electrodes. Indeed, the brain waves calm down. One woman who is a physician told me once, who was very much into concentrating, she came to a retreat in California. She says, I can feel the part of the brain which is being tranquilized as I repeat or count. I don't know what she was doing. And she said, I like it. I want to let go of it. Because, we talked about that. Will one meet up with the anxiety out of which we often start a practice like that? Meet that in the raw, without any armament, without any tools or defenses, without any escapes. Meet anxiety as it arises in all human beings. Maybe at times, one person wrote me, I had to attend a very important meeting and I was overwhelmed with anxiety. I sat down for 15 minutes and repeated a mantra, and the anxiety was gone, and it was a successful or good meeting that we had. So one understands cause and effect and uses it. Does one realize what one is doing? Just be very factual about it. I need to be calm here. Can't be all frazzled or heart beating, sweating. I want to be calm. Some people take tranquilizers. Someone else may repeat a syllable for 15 minutes. And the effect is there. We're not knocking that. We're just wondering about the whole of ourselves, the totality of ourselves, which is the totality of the human mind, not just fragments that can be influenced, manipulated, controlled for certain ends. And someone may say, I'm not interested in that. At this point, I'm interested in certain controls and finding effective ones and practicing to become proficient in them. That's what that is. So for that question, I find myself slipping into an old conditioned pattern of striving, wanting something, trying to get someplace. What is one going to do about it? One could say, well, if I didn't sit and enter into this sitting schedule, which reminds me, to which I respond in a conditioned way, then this won't happen. I'm not so sure. Because if that pattern is ingrained, lives in us to strive for something, as it does, we've been taught to strive since we were hardly born. Our parents already may have had fond dreams of what we were going to attain, what we were going to become, to continue the lineage, or to become something better than they were, so that they could live through us their dreams. And of course, the whole educational system with its grading is set to promote striving. Talked the other day with an educator, person who has real difficulties getting some children to read and write book reports. And he says the way to get the kids to do it is by tests. And I said, couldn't children read a book? And maybe not even have to write a book report, just for the enjoyment of reading it. That seemed so radical. Remember from our son, he loved reading, but he hated book reports. What did so-and-so feel? What would you have done if you had been? And all these questions. He didn't want to do that, but he had to, and he didn't, so he got F's. The teacher I was talking with said, the kids love grades. Even if I did away with grades, they would miss them. They want to see how they have done. Maybe the A and B ones, and C. I'm not so sure that someone loves to see a D or an F. So, this was just used as example how striving for something connected with grade or approval by the teacher or parent is wired into us, programmed right into us. Not just by the old Zen center. It's just that all of our various institutions, including the religious institutions, use this wiring to advance their own goals. Use it, plug into it, rather than shed light upon it. So even if one avoids the association by not sitting down, this person wasn't proposing that, we're talking about it, we're looking at it. One says, okay, if I sit in here, all this whole striving complex comes up, I don't want to have any part of it. I'll go for a walk instead, or that doesn't mean that this striving complex is seen, understood, and finished. It operates because the associations are there throughout our whole life. Whole society is one of goading to strive, to attain, to compete, to succeed, to rival, to excel. So will one meet up with it as it comes up here, no matter what it is that triggers it, and question it? Just wonder very innocently whether it has to go on. Because it confuses our life. It makes us feel separate from others. This whole comparison movement of the mind and body is born out of that striving. And comparison makes us all into separate, competing entities, with the accompanying envy, pride, discouragement. One can see it, can't one? How one leads to another, and all of these things which are not at all conducive to feeling harmonious within and with each other. And even though sitting quietly or walking quietly in a retreat is by no means the only time to become aware of this, awareness of this can happen whenever this striving mode comes up, whenever we want to attain something, want to be better than someone. Whether it's in the grocery line, wanting to get ahead of the next person if another line opens up, to be the first one in there. And see that. But the quietness and the energy to observe it in depth is here, is possible. It's up to each one of us. If we really want to meet up with ourselves on a superficial way and on a very deep level. Some of these things are so subtle, sit so deeply ingrained. And yet, if the awareness is subtle and deep, it meets up. It's not a matter of effort. Things are seen and can be understood and left behind, put aside, done without any effort. This is the action of the intelligence of insight. That intelligence of insight acts without any willpower. Willpower is, I want to be free from striving, as a new striving. New striving to get rid of an old striving. The questions about self-consciousness, I think it's very important to look at that whole phenomenon of being self-conscious and the burden of it, the pain of it, the intimidation of it. And let's also look whether this is a necessary, inevitable consequence or effect of sitting and being aware of what goes on in oneself. what is self-consciousness? What do we mean when we say, I feel so self-conscious? We mean, don't we, among many other things, we're looking at it, feeling that one is being watched, either critically by others or admiringly, approvingly or disapprovingly, feeling these attitudes toward one of criticism or admiration, approval or disapproval, and being impacted by that, influenced by it. A compulsion again to act accordingly, to act so one be approved of and not disapproved of, fearing criticism, getting hurt if one feels critically observed, never feeling at ease, because there's always someone around who may be evaluating me in one way or another. That's one aspect of self-consciousness, this influence through the eyes of others or the words of others, feeling evaluated, judged. But even without someone being around watching one, we do that to ourselves. We supply, through the capacity of this brain to imagine, we supply our own audience. In doing something, we can imagine how this will look to somebody else. We can walk and imagine how good we look to somebody else, or how undesirable or critical, without anyone being there. In other words, traveling, self-consciousness meaning traveling in the constant companionship of an audience, imagined or real, and feeling influenced by that. Why do we do that? It happens what one could almost call so spontaneously. Imaging what we're doing right now, what it will look to somebody else, how somebody else will take it. It is a result of our long training of being told what we are, how we are affecting others. Don't do that, this is bad, this is good, be nice, smile. I remember as a child, it was an incredible embarrassment to me when parents were talking about me in my presence. I was very little, I can remember that, how embarrassing it was. Or being asked, requested to perform in some way. I could have crept under the bed, and I did once. But little by little, this developing in one. And then, of course, one is told by parents, don't show off. Don't try to get attention. Oh, she just wants attention. One learns it, and then one is put down for it. One doesn't do it, and one is requested to do it. This is how we are. And I'm not putting down parents. They did what was done to them. We're rarely left alone as a child. And I meant not left alone in a room. We're often left alone. Parents have to go to work or out to entertain themselves. But we're not left alone with what we do. We get a reaction to it. Isn't that cute? And we have a little granddaughter. She is really cute. Unbelievably spontaneous though, but how long will that last? Because she's very intelligent. She garners all these admiring looks and remarks. She understands it already. And pretty soon it'll flip and she will be told, she'll just want attention. So it would be a marvelous thing to leave children alone with those comments, but to be with them on a non-commenting but direct level, playing together and not evaluating, oh, you did this terrific. A child never says to the adult, when the adult builds up blocks, oh, you did that terrific. It couldn't occur to him. I remember once flying over to Switzerland, and there was a little child, very young, in the aisle seat of the long bench with 5 seats, and he was trying to put some very complex blocks together. I was amazed that he could do it, the patience with which he went about it, and the fact that his mother didn't help him. She was sitting right next to him. Every once in a while a block would fall down, and eventually she'd pick it up and put it back on his tray. And finally, all the blocks were placed. And again, to my amazement, she didn't say, oh, how wonderful. Let it happen. And the child didn't need that encouragement at all. He was very pleased. Took it apart again, started over. I was very impressed with his mother. I later saw that she had 5 children. There were some in the front seat and some next to her. Maybe she was very wise, and maybe she just didn't have the energy to do one more thing, which was good for this child, for this boy. Because he was able to do something for its own sake, without getting this extra input. How good, how nice, how you did that. Isn't it amazing how he did that? Then the most precious thing gets lost, gets buried under the need to get those remarks again. Is this how self-consciousness develops? Out of all that was talked about us, all the reactions to us, and then these reactions are taken inward by the growing organism. One doesn't need parents anymore to say this is bad, this is good. One says it to oneself now. And then later to one's children. These things have become automatic. But we have to get at this on a deeper level here. Namely, wondering whether what we call looking at oneself or listening to conditioning coming up, meeting it, coming face to face with it, all these words we use, whether that in fact promotes this self-consciousness, or whether something different is going on, or can go on. So we have to be very clearly aware of what awareness is. Is the sitting with anxiety, for instance, we mentioned that before, a person who would do a mantra in order to be able to attend a meeting or calm oneself down. is the meeting of this anxiety where we'll not go into the mantra, where we'll not concentrate on something, but meet this, allow it to be felt, touched, listened to, seen, all the senses there as one. Does that need to be what we call self-conscious? No, if there's just the looking, without any judgment, without any prejudice against it, any desire not to be this way, to be a fearless person rather than an anxious person, when all of those attitudes toward what is seen and looked at and felt, when these attitudes are quiet, when there's just what is, then there isn't even a watcher. Then there's just what is. And in this, there being just what is, there is no self-consciousness. Self-consciousness is thought. Oh, is that what I'm like? I don't like to be like that. Is that how people see me? I don't want them to see me like that. I want them to see me like this. That's thought operating and affecting our behavior in the presence of direct audiences or imagined audiences. But what we're talking about here has nothing to do with judgment or creating a new personality, behavior modification. It has to do with seeing the truth, which is what it is, what is. You don't hassle with the truth. It's there. But the seeing, that's the truth. Seeing without judgment. Seeing and what is seen aren't two. It's true, it is so. And there is no duality in this, and therefore no conflict. And therefore no fuel or nurture for further anxiety. Because anxiety is nurtured by this feeling of split upness, duality, conflict, self-consciousness. And can the mind open up and listen? Feel, touch, see, not separate senses, but one whole perception of the dripping. Listen. Listen. It just goes like that, doesn't it? If thought comes up and says, that's nice, I like it, I can hear it, then the split has happened. Then there's the listener and what he or she hears. Or the thought, I can't hear it, I should hear it. If I don't hear it, other people won't appreciate me, approve of me. That's self-consciousness. Arising with these thoughts about oneself. But the listening and the drip, It's not two, is it? It's just that. It's just that. In the same undivided openness, which is not concentrating. We're not concentrating on that. It's just there. It's dripping. In the same openness, can there be listening to, feeling, touching, anxiety that was aroused by a thought, by remembrance, an idea? The idea may long have passed through the mind, but the anxiety now is there. Oh, the body has responded dutifully as it was programmed to release all kinds of chemicals and tighten the muscles, churn the stomach, whatever. Can that be listened to? Just like the melting snow dripping on a rock, without any desire that it may stop. That's division. That's me wanting something. But what's there is fact. What is it? And when the mind is open in that way, that there's no wanting to tackle it, get rid of it, diminish it, improve it, then the dripping and the anxiety and someone breathing and someone moving is all one undivided whole. It's not fragmented. Because there's no attitude, this is this is that, this is good, this is bad, this I keep, that I want to get rid of. That fragments the universe. So coming to the third question, it wasn't exactly a question. If attention can happen standing in the grocery line, why the sitting? And then the person going on saying, unless in my hectic life I sit every once in a while during the day, I'm just totally swept away with hecticness, not coming to what is going on. Me, my child, my relationship with my husband and whatever. I don't think we have to defend or justify sitting. It's up to each one to do it or not to do it. We're not propagating it, even though there's a large sitting room offered, so that when as many people come as have come to this retreat, we're not practically sitting on top of each other, so that there's some space and airiness. That's why we built a large place. So that even we are many people together, there is some feeling of spaciousness. Not feeling too crowded. So, we're not defending or justifying sitting. It's for each one of us to find out. What happens when this organism, which is raised and nurtured in rushiness, comes to quiet. The other day I was waiting to be picked up at a doctor's office. And there were these swinging doors, a little tiny little foyer, and then more swinging doors. And I could watch mothers and fathers coming with their children, either through the doors out or through the doors in. And there wasn't a one family where the parents didn't admonish their kids to hurry up. Hurry, hurry, let's go. And the kids wanted to look at those doors. One wanted to step with both boots in a slushy puddle. All the kids were walking relatively slowly. All the parents were rushing and herding their kids. Not always in a mean way, but compulsively. Hurry, hurry, hurry. Come on. C''MON. Can't even say the whole, I don't even have time to say the whole thing. Come on. We were all raised this way, and that's why we rush even when there is no rush to rush. So with all of this conditioning within us, running or temporarily a little bit dormant, but maybe not dormant at all, can one sit right into it and explore it? And see if it has to continue this way. Whether one can indeed work and do things but not feel rushed about it. Even though there are many jobs to be done, do what one is doing completely at that moment. Not rush through it in order to get to the next thing, to rush through that one too to get to the next thing. But have some leisure to also look through the window that one is cleaning. Watch the streaks of the squeegee, the drops rolling down to the side, meeting up with other drops and joining. To have that leisure to sit down quietly and watch everything that wants to come up, including the feeling of boredom that somebody brought up. We looked at that, what really is boredom, when we don't use the word, because we put the label on a state and then we don't look at it any longer. We know it now. We know what boredom is from our memory and conceptualizations. But what is it really when we leave the word aside? What is going on in this body-mind? As I want to say, I'm bored. And what we came upon is wanting things to happen, exciting things, interesting things. Again, the mind reaching out for something imagined, and the habituation to continuous excitement in which we grow up and live, constantly stimulating our body-mind and constantly being stimulated. Then when that abates in an environment such as this, it's sort of like almost a withdrawal symptom. But not to label it that and give up, but sit with it. What is it? Let it reveal itself in its complete depth. Go to the root of it. picture is coming to mind. I was describing it to someone. It was on a National Geographic. Maybe many of you have seen it. It was the picture of a lioness with her cub. It was so beautiful. I cut it out. Hang it up someplace. The lioness, strong, full of potential energy, lying sort of regally in the grass. Not lying completely, her two forepaws are in front of her, a little curve to her back body, and sort of the face into the sun, or sinking sun. There's some light on her whiskers, and some grasses in front of those whiskers are completely lit up. And the expression of her eyes is one of infinite patience, no rush, nothing to do, and yet awake. There, with, it looks like a detachment or dispassion. And to her side, with a little arm over her back, sort of like we put our arm around each other's shoulders sometimes. This is how this little arm doesn't reach all the way around. It's too short. Is that little cub standing up? Arm over her neck. That's where it was. Looking completely differently. It sees things. A lioness doesn't see specific things. She's just there, awake, but not focused on anything. And that little one is all eyes. You get the feeling it could jump away any minute to go after something. And she's just there. We will end here for today.